today we are talking about the Gospel of Mark. Last time we discussed what did we discuss last time? The four-source hypothesis, Q, the synoptic problem, etc. So today we're reading the first of the synoptic Gospels, the Gospel of Mark. Now I've already given you guys a little bit of background. You should know by now about when was the Gospel of Mark written? Around 70. And what politically was going on that's of significance in that year? Right, the Roman-Jewish War had begun at this time and was in full swing. Started in 67. Jerusalem was destroyed right around 70. So this is the context in which the Gospel of Mark is written. There's an all-out battle between Jews and Romans going on. And the followers of Jesus at this time probably would have been somewhat Jews, because Jesus was Jewish and his first followers were obviously Jewish. So some of the followers of Jesus would have been caught up in this war. Well, let's go ahead and get into the message of the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to be looking at the text, so please keep your Bible open to, did I say Matthew? I meant Mark. Please open up to the Gospel of Mark. Now, according to the Gospel of Mark, who is Jesus?
Messiah.
He is a Messiah.
The anointed one?
Yes, which means anointed one. The Greek translation is Christ. He's identified as a Messiah right there in the first verse. And what else is he?
Son of God.
He is a Messiah, and he is a Son of God. What proof is given in the gospel to demonstrate that he is who he says he is? How does he demonstrate, his credentials, so to speak?
By his actions, like healing and...
Healing of the sick is one thing that he does, right? You know that he is like a Son of God. Now remember, as Ehrman points out, Son of God is not a unique thing. There are lots of sons of God. Caesar is a son of God. Hercules is a son of God. It's just someone who's got some sort of divine credentials or divine genealogy. But sons of God have some sort of powers, usually, and one of Jesus' powers that he has to establish his credentials is healing the sick.
So you like teach? When he teaches, they obey?
He is an authoritative teacher. Now, not everybody views his teachings as authoritative, right? Who doesn't like his teachings?
the Jewish leaders.
The Pharisees and the Sadducees get in arguments in the Gospel of Mark with him about some of his teachings. But, by and large, most of his audience find him to be an authoritative teacher. He speaks, they listen. This is proof that, well, you wouldn't listen to a nobody. The fact that people are listening to him is evidence that he is something special. I'm a little warm. Do you guys mind if I open this a little bit?
No?
Please do.
There's a chair right there.
Good eye. All right, he heals the sick. He's an authoritative teacher. What else does he do to establish his credentials?
He casts out demons.
This is a big thing.
Spirits.
Casting out demons. What else does he do to establish his credentials?
Doesn't he like calm a storm?
Yeah, he does some other miracles. One of which
Makes
is
food or whatever.
calm storm, yep. Wait, what was that? Multiplies food.
And he cures that blind guy.
Well, that would go under the healing. But yeah. So he's healing the sick. He's an authoritative teacher. People listen to him. He's casting out demons and he's performing other miracles like he calms a storm. He uses the magic words abracadabra and the storm stops. And they're hungry people, and what happens in that story? He's been lecturing all day on the law, presumably, or something like this. And people are tired and they don't have any food, so what does he do? What's that? Right, he has the disciples gather up a few scraps and he like magically divides it, you know, abracadabra, boom, there's enough food for everybody all of a sudden. So these are some of the miraculous things that is said about Jesus in the Gospel of Mark that presumably is designed to prove that Jesus is who the Gospel says he is. Now, is Jesus a son of man?
No.
He's the son of God.
He's not here to judge.
Doesn't really say in the passages that we've looked at so far that he is a son of man. The idea, well, what's a son of man affiliated with? What genre of literature? Right, the apocalyptic literature. When the end comes, the son of man is going to judge. Now here, so far, it doesn't look like Jesus is going to be that son of man. Does he talk about the son of man?
Yes.
Yeah. He talks about the Son of Man, but he does not identify himself as the Son of Man. He talks about the Son of Man in the third person like it's somebody else. Now, in some of the other Gospels, he does seem to imply that he is the Son of Man. In this Gospel, you guys have to keep an eye out to see if you spot anything where he specifically identifies as the Son of Man. And until we find that, I'm not going to put it up here on the board. Now, who recognizes who Jesus is?
Disciples.
Nope. That's a really tricky one because in fact the disciples do not. And in fact the disciples are presented like how in this gospel?
I don't know.
They're presented as dummies. We'll get to that in a minute, but they're presented as dummies. But who does, Lauren?
I think Peter.
What's that?
Peter.
Well, later on, Peter's one of the disciples, so we're gonna pause on the disciples. As the gospel starts, even Peter doesn't get it.
Like obviously God, some demons
Yeah.
do, and then just the author and the reader.
Now, if you look on,
Doesn't he when he goes into the forest? Some demons say that he enters.
well, in chapter 1, look at chapter 1, starting with verse 9. In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. We read a little bit of this last time. And just as he was coming out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart and the Spirit descending like a dove on him. And a voice came from heaven saying, "You are my Son, the beloved, and with you I am well pleased." So, who recognizes that he's the Son of God? Well, God appears here as a voice and speaks to Jesus saying, "You are my Son." So God recognizes. Now, who else did you say?
There were some demons.
Demons recognize. Demons recognize that he is the Son of God, and they're afraid of him. What else?